As I developed my project, I learned that it would take more than educating people about law to close the gap between the public and law enforcement. I took this opportunity to explore the gap and question why it exists. I conducted interviews, giving fellow students the chance to express their opinions. The results were clear. Everyone I interviewed mentioned the media and the way it leads the public to perceive law enforcers negatively.
When asked to talk about the word law enforcement, cops, police, what do you think about?
I think of violence, I think of fear, I think of bias, I think of a organization that instead of making people feel safe actually makes them feel more afraid than they should.
So do you think that there's a gap between law enforcement and the public?
I absolutely do. I think there's a lack of education and understanding about the intent of the police force. I think they're more there to really help secure and provide people with safety, and the conception that the public has on the police officers is they're there to get you in trouble.
So why do you think that? Why do you think you have those initial reactions to the word police?
Well, because you see, because of some of the actions of the few, there's a huge guilt by association fallacy going on with the police force, because of some horrible, terrible incidents that have happened where innocent people have been shot and killed. The public bias has been put on that the police force is there to harm people that don't look like everyone else, or to harm people that they have suspicions on that really have no justification behind.
Great. And then lastly, can you name any media such as movies or famous people that have offered you a negative perspective on police?
Oh, Boys in the Hood, Ice Cube, Dr. Dre. I mean, any hip hop rapper. I mean, any person that's African American, any kind of a force that's in that public eye is gonna tell you about these different kinds of racial tensions that they see between the police officers and the minority public. Honestly,
when I say the words police, law enforcement, cops, what do you think of?
I think of the goods first, you know. You'd expect me to think of brutalities and stuff like that, but I think one thing is police, they're necessary, we definitely need them. I think one bad thing about them is that the media is just exploiting all the bad cops, and they don't really glorify the good ones at all, and I think that's just not petty. I just think that's it's sad because there's a lot of good cops out there and they all do their jobs pretty well.
Do you think that there's a gap forming between the community and law enforcers, and do you think the media plays a role in that?
Oh yes, definitely. Just like I said, there's a huge gap. Going back to Rodney King, the years like that, I think that was the breaking point of the gap, and ever since then it just started to expand and expand and expand, and hopefully I hope the gap gets smaller, but I don't think it is, to be honest.
What do you think of?
I think of a person in a uniform just enforcing laws, driving around.
All right. So do you think there's a gap forming between law enforcement and community?
Yeah, most definitely. Given the summer police brutality, you have all the cities that were rioting over police brutality, and also that only the negative aspects of police brutality, which is all negative, gets reported in the news, and that's what the community and the public see.
So you definitely think that media has an influence on public perception of police?
Most definitely.
All right. And then speaking of media, are there any, or what media can you think of off the top of your head that offers you a negative perspective about police?
Social media. Because often, when things are reported on social media, teenagers, because they're young and maybe immature, tend to react to it by tweeting as quick as that's why everything in social media is at your fingertips. You can respond in 10 seconds. You don't even have time to think about it. Social media for sure.
Thank you.
Do you think that there's a gap between law enforcement and the community?
Yes, I do. I feel because in society there's just a hierarchical structure anyway, and cops, even though they're people who just their daily job is that of a cop, they are that have a higher status in the law and justice category of society, and that people don't really see that is fair.
Okay. Do you think that media plays a role in broadening that gap?
Yes, I do, 100%. the media is like, they frame things to look like however they feel the public would react, like a certain way. And so I don't think that, I mean, they might give us like the facts, whatever, but it's not like presented in a sense that is completely unbiased ever. So, well, like, kind of just like in general, the hip hop industry like portrays cops like negatively, and like rap industry, and then like I mean, that's kind of it. Like, you're kind of taught and like raised to not like respect them in a sense.
I could not help but agree with my fellow students. Whether intentional or not, media such as movies, social media, news, and the people society look up to often portray law enforcers negatively.
Coming out for what? I ain't did shit. And it's always gonna be fuck the police. Black Lives Matter. Y'all the worst gang in the world, the police. And I said it. Fuck you.
This is NWA. We do what the fuck we want to do. We say what the fuck we want to say. So everybody, put the middle fingers high in the sky. Until the punk ass cop backstage.
The police coming straight from the underground. A young nigga got it bad cause I'm brown.
Hail the conquering heroes.
Got our first bust.
Yes! Yes!
Do you even know the Miranda rights?
Look, it obviously starts with, do you have the right to remain an attorney?
Did you say you have the right to be an attorney?
You do have the right to be an attorney if you want to.
Clips such as these show the belittlement of the people who have sworn to serve and protect. Media like this plays a huge role in how the public perceives our law enforcers and vice versa. According to the U.S. Department of Justice Principles of Good Policing, the perception of bias-based policing decreases the trust between law enforcement and the community necessary for effective community-oriented and problem-solving policing. Likewise, bias-based public perception does the same thing, discouraging law enforcers, creating even more mistrust. In order to close the gap between law enforcement and the public, we not only need to be educated about the law, but know how to filter bias we find in the media to ensure that what we are perceiving is true and accurate.